Holiday in the Steel Jungle by Elton John.
After 4 hours of waiting on his cramped ship and another 6 hours of bureaucratic runaround, Elias Thorn was starkly reminded why he steered clear of so-called civilized space. He had never had to ask permission to land on one of the planets he was surveying, and the things on those planets were honest. The animals or the weather might try to kill you, but they didn't hide their motives. Still, after almost 15 years of spending most of his time on dangerous planets and the rest in his cramped 100-year-old ship, Elias felt he'd earned a break. He had heard tales of Station NEXS5, nicknamed the Nexis, a glittering metropolis of steel, glass, and unrestricted technology suspended in the void. The allure of an unrestricted station, where every imaginable technology and species mingled freely, was too tempting to resist. It was the perfect contrast to the rugged, untamed worlds he usually explored. As he stepped into the station, the first thing he saw was a group of 6 identical robots carrying boxes with an almost human-like casualness. Their fluid movements suggested they were more than mere machines, likely a result of digital memory transfer. He double-checked his tablet to ensure his dog scout was safely in regenerative cryo. As he looked around the bustling dock, his eyes caught sight of an unusual pair holding hands, one almost human but with a long whip-like tail and orange skin, the other distinctly alien, chatting animatedly. His eyes were then drawn to 6 men in dark uniforms, unmistakably station security, moving toward his ship. They were coming directly towards him. He almost turned and went back inside. Once he left the station, he'd be out of their jurisdiction, but they each carried guns, and if they killed him on the station, it was unlikely anyone would ask questions. So he put his hands on his head and waited. As they reached him, the largest struck him in the stomach with the butt of his gun, ignoring Elias's clear surrender. A large hand grabbed the back of his jumpsuit, pulled him to his feet, and said,
"We know you're smuggling artifacts from Varencia Prime."
Of course, that was what this was about. Varencia had been a colony world of the extinct race of Tyrexians. Their tech had been built to last. So he said,
"You know that because it's on my ship's manifest. I have 3 non-working artifacts. Their value was included in my docking fees."
"Commander says there is more, and that we should search your ship for it and confiscate any we find,"
another of the men said. Elias knew his rights but also the risks of asserting them. He said,
"I'm willing to let you into my home, as long as you treat it with respect. But I'm not giving up my rights as a galactic citizen, and I won't let you or anyone else back in without permission."
Half-blank faces looked at each other, trying to understand. He'd let them in. If he didn't, he'd likely be shot. But he'd also be sending a report. There wasn't much you could do to a station commander, but with enough reports, the station could be taken off the list of safe stations, meaning far fewer people would come here and the commander would make a lot less money. He stepped to the side, but one of the guards decided he didn't do it fast enough or simply enjoyed striking people, because there was another blow to his stomach. This time, Elias didn't give him as much. He bent with the blow, no point in getting hurt more, then straightened up and stared the man in the eye. Sometimes it was better not to appear dangerous to animals, but other times the best choice was to convince them you were. He didn't get to find out if that was a mistake because before the man could react, a piece of metal about the size of a fist struck one of the guards in the head. It wasn't dangerous, but someone had disrespected their authority and they weren't the type to let that stand, even if trying to do something about it diminished their authority far more. So 5 of the 6 men, including the one with the scratch on his forehead, turned and sprinted after the rock thrower. The final guard who remained to watch over Elias might have been a problem if he had actually done his job, but he was too busy watching his colleagues chase after what appeared to be an alien 12-year-old girl. That look of wishing he was going to get to help hurt a child was enough for Elias, who slipped the stun stick from his belt and drove it into the side of the guard. The guard collapsed to the floor. Hopefully, he'd injure himself in the fall. But even if he hadn't, he'd be out for several hours. Elias locked his ship and set the autopilot to circle the station at a good distance. He would have let them search it before, but now it seemed too dangerous. He stepped over the unconscious guard and accidentally stepped on one of his hands. Across the bustling dock, he saw a young, wisp-thin alien with emerald green skin and large, shimmering eyes, gesturing urgently for him to follow. As he neared her, she said,
"I'm Kya.
her voice a melodious blend of clicks and trills.
Those goons will be after Teps for a while, but we need to skedaddle quick-like."
I'm not keen on adding resisting arrest to my rap sheet. That one might actually stick.
Elias said, but he followed the wisp-thin green alien deeper into the station.
"The commander's desperate to keep that off the record. The swarm caught them roughing you up, and this station's already on thin ice. If it gets kicked off the safe list, he's the first one out. Happened twice before."
Glad to have someone who knew the station, he allowed the young alien to lead him into the maze of the Nexis interior. As he did, he said,
What's the swarm?
"The swarm. She's everywhere, a cloud of tiny spies that see everything. Nothing escapes Xefinnle, and she keeps her reins on the big boss."
How do you know she's here?
Kya glanced at him, her irises shifting through a spectrum of colors.
"It's like a metal haze, see? She's not thick here, mostly just tracking stuff. Xefinnle's main swarm is probably holed up in her quarters."
Now that he was looking, he saw it. Tiny silver robots that looked like dust in the sunlight. Those were part of a collective mind that was, evidently, Xefinnle. With every twist he became more lost until he said,
Where are we going?
"Oh, just taking you on the grand tour.
Kya teased, her voice lilting with mischief.
Wanted to see how long you'd follow a stranger for getting suspicious."
Her eyes sparkled, revealing a street-smart confidence. He sat on one of the air recyclers, exhausted, and said,
This was supposed to be a vacation.
"Nexis for a vacay. Boy, your regular digs must be rough."
Kya exclaimed, shaking her head with a playful grin.
"Slick, you sure know how to pick 'em."
I live on my ship, scouting new worlds every few months. Thought I'd enjoy seeing people and eating food I didn't cook for a change. Clearly wrong about the people. But I need a place to stay. Any hotels around?
Again Kya laughed, but this time Elias thought he understood better. This part of the station wasn't the type of place people who needed or could afford a hotel came to. Automatically built by the station's growth protocols, it was old, badly planned, unorganized, and filled with hungry street kids.
How about the black market? I'm curious why the station commander thinks I have Terexian artifacts.
"If anyone would know, it's Dexton."
Kya said and turned down a hallway. She twisted through several more hallways and into a larger room, where a wide metal table stood, flanked by two large insectoid creatures and a small, big-eyed alien with a sharp gaze.
"This is Dexton,"
Kya said, nodding towards the smaller alien, who exuded an air of authority despite his size.
"And you're?"
Dexton paused, his eyes flicking over invisible records before continuing.
"Elias Thorn, Space Scout for the Human Alliance. The station commander believes you are attempting to smuggle in Terexian artifacts without paying his tariffs,"
he said, leaning forward with a knowing look.
You are correct. I'm accused of smuggling undeclared artifacts. I hoped you could explain where they got that idea.
Dexton leaned forward, his piercing gaze unwavering.
Saying he has an idea is pretty generous towards the commander. But his greed is notorious. Fabricating charges to extort visitors is his usual modus operandi.
So, it's a shakedown, not a legitimate concern.
You tell me,
Dexton said, turning his head to study Elias. Kya bounced on her toes, adding,
"What's our next move, Slick? Can't let these thugs have the upper hand."
Elias ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident.
I'm open to ideas.
Dexton tapped his chin thoughtfully.
Xefinnle is omnipresent on this station and collects information. She has a history with the commander and has been looking for a good way to replace him with someone more pliable. She might assist if we can make it worth her while.
Elias raised an eyebrow.
And how do we convince her to help?
Kya grinned.
Xefinnle's all about fresh intel. You give her something new and shiny, and she'll be eating out of your hand.
Dexton nodded.
I am a scout. I have records from a dozen worlds that haven't been entered into the Galactic repository yet.
As they discussed their plan, Elias felt a faint, tingling sensation on his skin, a subtle but constant reminder of the swarm's presence.
Xefinnle,
Dexton called out, his voice calm and authoritative, looking up as if addressing the air around them.
we require your assistance.
A soft, harmonious voice filled the room, emanating from all directions.
Elias Thorn,
Xefinnle said.
I've been monitoring your situation. The commander's tactics are predictable.
Elias hesitated, weighing the offer.
I'm willing to share my data from Varencia Prime. How do I know you'll keep your end of the deal?
Trust is rare here, Elias. But bringing down the commander benefits me too. If this station gets kicked off the safe registry, less new information comes in.
Elias glanced at Dexton and Kya, both nodding in encouragement.
All right. I'll transfer everything I have from my ship to your quarters.
The next step was implementing the plan. Elias sent a message to the commander, feigning compliance and requesting a meeting to discuss the supposed undeclared artifacts. It put him firmly in the station commander's grip, but he didn't see much other choice. Elias stepped into the station commander's office, his heart pounding. Though he possessed more power than the commander realized, the man's ruthlessness meant he had to tread carefully. The commander arrived, flanked by two of his thugs. His expression was smug, confident in his control over the situation.
You've decided to cooperate, then?
Elias nodded, keeping his demeanor calm.
I want to resolve this peacefully, but I need assurances that my property and I will be safe.
The commander sneered.
Assurances. You're in no position to demand anything. Hand over the artifacts, and maybe I'll let you leave the station unharmed.
Elias took a deep breath.
So, if I don't give you the artifact, you'll kill me.
And enjoy doing it.
The station commander said, standing up with a malicious grin. That was easier than I expected, Elias thought, as the room filled with the hum of Xefinnle's swarm, revealing she had recorded the commander's incriminating conversation. The commander's face twisted with rage.
You idiots. You were supposed to keep the nanobots out.
He then glanced at Elias and said,
You think this will save you?
Elias held his ground.
I think this is enough to get a station already on probation kicked off the safe station's registry.
The commander reached for his gun, but Kya, who had largely been ignored, reached it first. She held it unsteadily with both hands and said,
End of the line for you, bully boy.
her voice unwavering despite the gun's weight. Elias turned to the swarm.
This is Elias Thorn. I'd like to report a crime. I've been extorted and threatened by the station commander of Nexis Station. I do not believe that this is currently a safe station, and should not be on the registry.
The station's security knew that there was no way to stop that message. Not when it was sent by someone who worked for one of the Corps, like every space scout. So one of the thugs drew his gun and calmly shot the station commander. He then said,
It seems that in a struggle for power, the commander was killed. Once he is replaced, I trust you will withdraw your complaint.
the gun that he had just used to shoot his boss waving around menacingly.
Of course.
Elias said. Kya sauntered over, her grin wide and proud.
Didn't think that'd fly, but hey, color me impressed.
She said, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Elias chuckled.
Thanks for your help. Couldn't have done it without you.
Kya's eyes sparkled with excitement.
So what's next for you?
Elias thought for a moment.
A couple of weeks of drinking, then back to exploring. Been thinking it's time to take on an apprentice. Interested in seeing the galaxy.
You bet. Always dreamt of seeing more than just these metal walls.
Kya replied, her grin widening.
Great. Start by telling Dexton I've got a shuttle full of unregistered Terexian artifacts to sell.
So the commander was right about you being a smuggler.
Kya asked, a hint of amusement in her voice.
It's a big galaxy, kid. Can't fix every problem I find just for fun. Getting rid of the commander was good for the station, and I get to sell the artifacts with significantly less risk. And how do you think I can afford a vacation on Scout's pay?
Elias said, and he began to plan out how he was going to spend the money, assuming there was anything left after 2 weeks in the bar.
I've written quite a few stories about people from advanced civilizations exploring frontier worlds. It's a format that I enjoy for short stories. It lets me limit the number of characters, explore something strange or interesting, and because they're alone, things that normally wouldn't be a big deal become important. I also enjoy the idea of camping, and so watch a fair amount of videos on things like bushcraft, and writing those stories lets me pretend that those videos are research. So this time I decided it might be fun to write the reverse, to have a scout visit not just a populated world, but something that's as far from the frontier as possible. A space station fits that well because it's an entirely unnatural environment and by nature very technological. Adding in a bunch of advanced technology and bureaucracy and corruption just fit that theme. If you enjoyed this, you can get more stories, my thoughts on the world, and a free book by signing up for my free newsletter at nsci-fi.com. And if you want to help me keep making these stories and get access to over 40 patron exclusive stories, then come to my Patreon at patreon.com/Elton. Sign up. Thank you. Elton Gar.